negotiation and deal structures. This is another very valuable module that I think will help you guys tremendously. So let's dive into it. The core idea is structure over price. Now, let's say you get an offer for your business, for easy math, let's say it's $1 million, and you're all excited. You're like, great, I got what I wanted, $1 million. But then you look at the fine print and you see that, you get 60% upfront cash, you get 15% earnouts, you get 20% rollover equity, and you get 5% seller note. And this changes things drastically because you don't get all the cash up front. And now, what is the anatomy of an LOI? It really matters to look into this in detail and make sure you're not getting screwed anywhere and getting what you want. And this is where a banker or a broker comes in and kind of starts their negotiation process because they have experience. But you'd be able to kind of run this process yourself if you kind of know what to look for. So the first thing is the price, the headline valuation for the business. Now, you might not always get what you're setting it at, but this is the most important number to look at, of course. If you're selling it for $1 million and get $800K offer, that's $200K less. And you want to look at what the structure consists of or if this offer makes sense for you. So right after that, we dive in right into the structure mix. Is it a blend of cash, equity, earnouts, and notes? Or is it a blend of cash or an earnout? There could be many different structures that a buyer comes up with to present to you. Another thing is working capital peg. So this is the target amount of the working capital at closing. And we'll kind of dive into this a little further in the module, but this is also another important part of it. And also exclusivity. How long will you let them perform their due diligence and look into the deal? And then we also get reps and warranties, your post-closing liabilities and the funds that are held back. So it's also important to understand the pros and cons of each component or deal structure. So in an all-cash deal, it's the most simplest, of course, and all payments is made at closing. And this is quite often the rarest to find because buyers want a good deal and they want to make sure they're not overpaying. So if they do offer all cash, most times it is below what you're looking for in regards to the purchase price. But if you do get the full purchase price, that's amazing. And the pro is certainty, and the con is often a lower headline price. And the second is an earnout. So this is future payments tied to a certain metric of the business. It could be revenue, it could be EBITDA, and you want to define the KPIs precisely to avoid any disputes in the future. And the pro is you can bridge valuation gaps. Let's say, the buyer's only looking to pay $800K for your deal instead of $1 million. How you can close that gap is, a $200K earnout or something like that to get to the $1 million price range that you're looking for. The con of this is it can be risky and complex. You want to make sure that you're not really getting screwed on this part, and we'll kind of dive deeper into that, but a lawyer can really help you with this. And also rollover equity. You can retain a minority stake in the new company that the buyer is launching or opening, and it's almost like a second bite of apple. You get a percentage in the new company, and in the future they can exit and you get paid whatever your percentage is. The con of this is it could be liquid and pretty risky. Now also, one of the most common ones is seller financing, and you can act as the bank or the lender to the buyer. And you got to make sure that you negotiate the interest rate and the security. A lot of times there is a current market rate set by the IRS in the USA, which is the AFR rate, and you want to make sure that you're following that correctly. Working capital. This is a lot of times kind of hidden in negotiations, but you want to make sure that you understand this. Working capital is the agreed upon level of operational liquidity or cash that the seller must leave in the business at closing, and it can directly impact the final purchase price via an adjustment mechanism. Now, when you're doing this, you want to define normal working capital clearly. And a lawyer can help you with this, but it can be, a certain formula over the last 12 months that will get you that peg or the targets, making sure that you don't leave it vague. And you want to avoid open-ended adjustments. You want to set a collar or a cap for the minimum and the maximum range to make sure that it doesn't get changed throughout the deal. And you want to also align on the accounting basis, whether it's GAAP or cash basis or accrual, because this is also important in understanding how to calculate the working capital. And an analogy we can use is going back to the car. We can think about a business sale like selling a car. And you and the buyer can agree on the price for the car itself, but the price assumes that the car comes with a normal amount of gas in the tank, which is enough to drive it home and run it for a week. And we can kind of picture this as the working capital target, or the PEG. And actual working capital, or the target working capital, means the seller leaves the normal amount of gas or cash in the tank. And this means there's no price adjustment. And the second scenario is the actual working capital is over the target working capital, which leaves the seller with too much gas or too much cash, and the price goes up, the buyer pays the seller the extra amount of cash. And then there's also actual working capital is below the target working capital range, and the seller leaves too little gas, which means that the business can't run, it doesn't have enough capital or cash to keep on going. And then the price goes down and the seller pays the buyer back. What are some key negotiating principles? You want to anchor with a justified range. And this is backed up by a few different methods that you can use, which is comparables, a third-party valuation or something like that, to bring multiple metrics to the buyer. And it's not just a single number, it's backed up by multiple sources. This will help you a lot when you're negotiating. And also the trade price versus the structure. You must be prepared to trade a higher headline price for better terms, which could be more cash up front. It could be a shorter earnout period or less in escrow, so keep this in mind. And then you also want to control exclusivity, or the no-shop period as we like to call it, to 10 to 30 days max, most likely for a deal of the size, because the buyer really does not need that much time to look into the deal to consider whether they want to make an offer or not. And you also want to keep parallel conversations. So if your process allows, speak to multiple buyers at once, because this is going to be your ultimate leverage and you can field multiple offers at once. Now here's a mini case that we can look at. So buyer sends an offer as 4x of the annual recurring revenue, which is 27 million, 50% cash, 50% earnout, which is 13.5, 13.5. And then the earnout metric that they proposed is net revenue, which is really vague, an exclusivity period of 90 days, and the working capital is undefined. And then after some negotiation, making it safer, we get to the same price, but a little bit more cash up front, less on the earnout, so you get 16.2 million up front, 10.8 on the back end. And then your earnout metric is EBITDA proxy, which is a clear number of the EBITDA. And in the LOI, or the asset purchase agreement, we can make sure what gets left out of the calculation and what gets thrown in. And then also the exclusivity, change it to 35 days. You really don't need more than that. And then also define a target with a collar for the working capital, and we added clear reporting rights. This makes the deal much safer for you as the seller. Now, some things you want to avoid is vague earnout definitions, and when you're working with a lawyer, they'll be able to help you with this, but you want to avoid using metrics like revenue or profits without precise auditable formulas, because this can result in future lawsuits or some kind of quarrels down the line. And you want to also avoid unlimited or long exclusivity, giving them 2, 3, even more months, because this can really kill your velocity or your speed in the deal of fielding offers. And then also undefined working capital. Failing to set a specific working capital target and formula before signing the LOI is like giving the buyer a blank check. They can claw back the price, which is what you want to avoid. And then full data room pre-LOI. Never share your most sensitive data until you have signed an LOI with a buyer and they are qualified. Now you can also use these tools, which will be in the resources section, which is the LOI template that you can start off with, and then also some essential resources for negotiation with links down below in the description.